So I'm part of the Loughborough Students' Union Christian Union, and I've been a Christian for nearly 6 years now. So yeah, I gave my life to Jesus when I was 14, but it's only actually very recently which I've really experienced kind of suffering, if you like. So I just wanted to share a bit about what's going on with my life recently and how God has kind of helped me through that. So November, what was it last year? 2012, wasn't it? So November, October time, 2011, my dad got something called transverse myelitis. So it's an extremely rare condition where it's similar to cancer in the way that your own body attacks itself. So he basically got an infection in his lower spine, and his body, as you know, the immune system tries to fight that off. But my dad's immune system is kind of hyperactive, as it were, and so it kept charging away, and even after he fought off this virus, it kept on charging away and then kind of started breaking into his spine and just ended up severing his spinal cord. And so my dad was progressively becoming more and more paralysed, and this lesion was, it kept on going, chopping away at his spine all the way up. So in a matter of weeks, he had to be straight into hospital. And as time went on, it was going up and up and up and up, and he was becoming more and more paralysed until it came up to his neck. So there was one point where he could only just nod his head and move his eyelashes, blink, that sort of stuff. He couldn't move arms, and it was a really, really tough time. And in fact, there was one night where he nearly died. If the lesion in his spine had gone one vertebrae more up, then that's the kind of point at which so the brain it's the brain that kind of tells you to kind of breathe in the oxygen and take it all in. So if that had been severed, my dad's brain would have kind of stopped giving that command to the rest of his body to function, and he would have died. But at that point, he had friends in hospital praying for him, and it stopped. And praise God, it's started to come down. But I really want to share, just briefly rewind to when I was small. Me and my dad really didn't get on at all. We hated each other. He was never there for me, and he saw his duty as man of the house to be the breadwinner and earn all the money, and so that meant he was working ridiculous hours. He'd be out the door before he even got out of bed, so we're talking 6, maybe 7 in the morning. He'd gone to work. He wouldn't get back until maybe 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock, and even then he had more work to do. He'd just crack out his laptop on the sofa, carry on working. And so I'd never get a bedtime story, I'd never get a hug, so I'd never ever see him. And the only times he was there for me was at the weekends when I was naughty. He would give me a smack, he'd hit me, something like that. So I never really had a good relationship with him. And whenever I wanted to spend time with him, he was always just too tired to do anything with me, because he had too much work to do and was just tired those times when he had time off. So we had a pretty rubbish relationship. And I was thinking, well, how can there be a God in heaven if this is what my earthly father treats me like? I feel absolutely rubbish. I feel unloved. So if this is what a father's like, how can God be a father? How can this be true? But his suffering has actually, changed things in my life completely, as he's been in hospital. And there's kind of two things that I really want to bring out in this. Firstly, my dad was in hospital for a whole year, just sitting in the same bed, unable to do anything. He was getting bed sores because he was just lying still. He wasn't able to do anything. And we were going in and trying to visit him, and I was able to make more time with him. And actually through that, I've actually, been able to talk to him just face to face, and we've been able to settle things, and our relationship's grown. And he's actually really sorry for, he acknowledges the fact that actually he didn't spend any time with me when I was little. And he didn't realise, but actually that really, really hurt me. And he's really apologetic for that, and we've really kind of, made up for that. And our relationship is still improving. And thankfully, he's now at home, even though we've had to make huge modifications to the house. We've got a ramp coming up to the front door now. We've got a lift that goes through the floor so we can get up to his bedroom. But during this time of suffering, people can often say, why is it happening? Why is it suffering? I'm sure for my dad, he might be thinking the same. We were thinking the same as a family. like, oh God, like what's going on here? But actually it's really helped to restore a broken relationship between me and my dad. And I know my brothers, have had the same issues. We've really found it difficult that we've had a dad who's just not been there. And we've really had this chance while he's in hospital just to really become, straight and talk to each other as a family and just kind of reunite and really get back together, which has been fantastic. So often when you're in it, it's really, really tough. But actually God will use that and work it for good. So I'm not saying God planned my dad to have that incident, I'm not saying God wanted that. But in that time of suffering, he used that to bring our family back together and really worked it for good. And then the second point I want to make is, while my dad was in hospital, he's brought up in a Christian family. He's been a Christian all his life as well. And so when he was in hospital, what really amazed me about him, and I've never been more proud to be his son, was that he said, I love God and I love Jesus. Here's my rock and here's my centre. And I'm thinking, this is a man who can't see his family barely ever. He can't provide for them anymore. He effectively has no work. He has nothing. He's just laying in a hospital bed, relying on people to help him go to the toilet. He has to have nurses to shower him. He has to have people running around and just being there for him, just constantly. And he must feel just, like such a pain in the backside, just because he has to have all these people just taking care of him. But he was saying, God, I love you. Just thank you for my life. And you're just amazing. And he had Jesus at the centre of everything. And I was thinking, this is a man who has nothing, and yet he's proclaiming God and just saying how amazing and glorious he is. And so, as a Christian, I've come to kind of three conclusions about my dad. That, in this period of suffering, what he's saying about God is either a lie, he's either barking mad and is delusional, or actually what he's saying about God is he's really telling the truth. And so, I've grown up with my dad, and even though our relationship sometimes hasn't been perfect, I can just see by the way he is, and you can tell when someone's not quite there, if they're a bit mad, a bit delusional. And my dad just isn't like that. Just because I've grown up with him, I know he's not mad. So that therefore means he's either lying or he's telling the truth. And so if he was lying, I think to myself, why would you bother going through all that? Why would you worship a God when you are paralysed in a hospital bed, being absolutely helpless and being just set apart from your family and not being able to work and just being so dependent on everyone and everything? And he still worshipped God. What if you knew that God was a lie in your heart? If you knew you were lying, why would you turn to God? So therefore that only leaves one option really, and that my dad was telling the truth, and that God really is our centre, he really is everything, and that he is a God who loves us unconditionally, even when we're going through suffering.